Final Fantasy III, played recently on the Switch Pixel Remaster, is one of the early Final Fantasy games that never left Japan in its original form, staying exclusive to the Famicom and never gracing the American or European NES with its presence. Well, maybe grace is a bit strong a word. This is at the bottom of my rankings for the 3 Famicom Final Fantasy games, but it's certainly not bad, and it does have its dedicated fans. The first time Americans and Europeans got a taste of Final Fantasy III was roughly 20 years after its original release, when the 3D remake for the Nintendo DS came out. That's how I first played it. The 3D version of the game is a reimagining in a lot of ways, rather than a straight one-to-one remake. And while it's fairly well liked, I personally didn't care for it. I still liked the first 2 games more than this one, now having played the remaster of the original 2D form, but I definitely did enjoy this version far more than I did the DS remake. With Final Fantasy III, it seems like Square tried to take what worked from the first 2 games and put those together to make a perfect third game. That didn't work. The first 2 are both better games in my opinion, but the influence of each of its predecessors is clear. While named characters are distinct and important to the game, like in Final Fantasy II, the story is as thin as in the first Final Fantasy. Actually, it pretty much rhymes with that game's story. There are 4 magic crystals, and they've had their light taken by some dark big baddie who wants to plunge the world into evil dark badness. 4 nameless heroes, orphans this time because inclusivity, I guess, set out from their podunk little village to traverse the world, kill evil things, and restore the light to the 4 crystals. See? Basically just Final Fantasy's story with some garnish. As a very narrative-driven gamer, I found this to be disappointing because I really liked the more story-focused direction of Final Fantasy II. There are elements of that game in Final Fantasy III, though. It's just borrowing from the skill system rather than the story. The skill system from the second game is gone, but Final Fantasy III does introduce a job system that has a lot of similarities. Your characters level up as in the first Final Fantasy and most JRPGs, but every character has a job. Basically a traditional class, but able to be switched whenever and however often you want. And each character has a job level for each job. If your job level is 1, you have access to that job's abilities, but you won't be very good at them. The Geomancer, for example, can essentially use magic from the environment without having to deal with MP. But at level 1, you're going to be doing crap damage, whereas at level 99, you're basically killing gods in your sleep. Unlike the 3D remake, which was pretty restrictive with the job changing, you're free to make whomever you want, whatever class you want, whenever you want. The Pixel Remaster has gorgeously remade pixel graphics and an amazing orchestral soundtrack, but I've extolled those virtues in my reviews of Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy II. It's worth the attention though, so I'm going to extol again. The sprites have all been redone from the ground up by the game's original designer, and the dungeons and overworld now feature gorgeous new shadow, lighting, and fog effects. It's definitely, at least by default, similar to the old Final Fantasy in how it plays, but it absolutely does not look or sound like the old Final Fantasy. It wasn't just the visuals and audio that got the modernization treatment, though. Quality of life features were added to make what would otherwise be a slow and rather plodding experience feel more like a modern game. The menus were redone to be more intuitive and user-friendly, and auto-battle was added to have your characters just use the same action repeatedly and at a slightly faster overall speed to make grinding a lot less tedious. There are also mini-maps of both the overworld as well as every dungeon, making navigation a lot less obnoxious. They also added the ability to save anywhere. Technically, the regular save has to be done on the overworld, but you can quick save literally anywhere, and those quick saves are persistent even if you close the game. So it basically functions the same way, except just one quick save slot versus the 30 regular save slots. The last big quality of life change was, as was the case with the pixel remasters of Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy II, the inclusion of optional boosts. You can set XP gained, job XP gained, and money gained from battles, down to half the usual gain, all the way up to 4 times the usual gain. This is great for busy and tired adults with little free time to game who don't want to devote that precious free time to mindless grinding. It's totally optional. You can have the basic vanilla experience if that's what you want, but the option is there if you want to speed up the less fun part of a JRPG a bit. As I did with Final Fantasy II, I kept the money rate the same, but set the experience and job experience to 2x during my playthrough. Final Fantasy III is a competent JRPG adventure, but it was a bit of a mixed bag for me. It had some things, like the job system and named characters having distinct personalities and motivations, that I really liked and appreciated. The job system, while a lot simpler than its incarnations in later games, gives a lot of variety in how you play, and gives you the ability to replay the game numerous times without ever having exactly the same combat experience. On the other hand, I very much did not appreciate the trimmed-down overall narrative that was given a lot less emphasis than in the previous game. I also found traversing the overworld to be annoying. There are 3 different airships that you end up getting. One can land on solid ground but not water. One goes super fast and can land on water but not solid ground. And neither of those can go over mountains. That's something that only the 3rd airship, which is super slow and can only land on solid ground, can do. It has a very limited ability to do that, though, as it can only fly over top of a single square of mountain. That lets you get to some late-game areas, but it doesn't do anything to make world traversal more efficient. Overall, though, Final Fantasy III is a solid JRPG, even if it definitely felt like a step down from the second game to me. My rating for Final Fantasy III Pixel Remaster on Switch, Xbox Series X, PS4, and PC is a C.